Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 2 of Motherhood and Making, which is the first episode of the Heirloom series. And I'm calling today's episode, Why Nothing Meaningful Should Be Rushed. Hi there, I'm Whitney, and you're listening to Needles, Motherhood and Making, and I'm a professional seamstress, embroiderer, and just recently a long-arm quilter. Most importantly, I'm a wife and a mother to 3 amazing little humans. This podcast lives at the intersection of family life and making. It seems that these days we rush around so much. It almost begins at the moment our eyes open in the morning. We rush to get ourselves ready for the day. We rush our children around to get them ready for school. We rush breakfast, maybe even skipping or opting out to just have a Pop-Tart on the car ride to school. From there, we rush off to work. The alarm rings, and then we rush back to pick up our kids, rush them to soccer or piano practice. Can any of you relate? My apologies if that was triggering, because it actually was me doing all the things last year. I was the mother that was always rushing around. The Lord had placed me in a teaching position at a school that was actually in the same district that I used to teach for several years back. This time, though, it was different because I was older. I married. My husband was off with the military on some orders, and I also had 3 kids. The last time I was teaching for this district, I had just recently got married and graduated college. So lots of changes. Because my husband was on orders, it was all up to me to get myself and 3 children out the door before 6:30. Because I had to drop my son off and be in our school's parking lot by 7:30. It just seemed like everything was so rushed all the time. I would come home and think, all of this is for what? So I could do it all again tomorrow? And I'm certain that you understand, because this is the way of life for a lot of you who are listening. But what if we allowed ourselves the time to actually really slow down? Not to just sit down and veg out and doom scroll on our phone, to create something worth your energy. As mothers, we are pulled in so many different directions that unless we make plans to slow down, it isn't naturally going to happen on its own. Quality is quiet and slow. It doesn't beg for attention. It earns it over time. Today, I want to discuss with you why slowing down matters and how slowing down is really an heirloom skill. It's not just in sewing, but it's also in how we create memories and show up for our children. Rushing has a way of leaving fingerprints. It shows up in our seams, it shows up in how things are worn, and it shows up in how long something ultimately can be worn. If you have ever sewn something quickly, maybe during nap time, late at night, or trying to squeeze in one last project, you already know these feelings. You skip pressing. Maybe you don't change the needle unless it breaks, and you tell yourself it'll be fine. And maybe at first it is, but then you'll notice the seams are going to start twisting, which is from uneven tension that cannot be pressed out. The stitch length is uneven, which causes puckering, and seams that will pop under strain, and the fabric pulls where it shouldn't. When we give ourselves the opportunity to slow down in our sewing projects, we are able to pay attention to the details that often will make or break our work. One of the details that my eye always finds first whenever I'm looking at another person's work are the seams. And I don't do it to be mean. Because I consider myself a professional, it is something that I naturally look at. The seams will often quietly tell me all that I need to know about the seamstress. Are they taking the time to take care of those small details? And it's the small details that actually end up coming all together to make the whole garment. Maybe this is just me, but If we can't take care of the small details, then how are we going to manage the bigger details? I think there's actually scripture on that too. Are the seams finished or raw on the inside? And this is really specifically for the garments that I plan on buying for myself or my children at the store. Do they lay flat? Are they bulky or pulling where it shouldn't? Did you know that we're supposed to change the needle out every 8 hours of use or before a new sewing project? I realize that this is wild, but it makes a difference. If you are working with delicate fabrics, you want to change the needle so you are not snagging the fibers, especially if you're going from really thick fabric like canvas and going to a delicate fabric like satin. Your embroidery needles need to be changed often because the holes may be slightly larger from it dragging the thread through the fabric and or from a little burr on the end of the needle that's oftentimes too small for the eye to detect. And that's where we get snags and tears. And I've even noticed that the stitches, when I'm doing a satin stitch, sometimes the thread doesn't fill up that hole from the needle because the needle is punching a larger hole than the thread. And not to mention that there are so many types of needles for different projects, but the type of needle is just as important for your project as the fabric and thread are. I do have a YouTube video on needles if you're interested in watching that, and you can find that at Needles Embroidery on YouTube. Another time-consuming detail is pressing. When we press our seams, the garment or quilt that we are sewing together goes from looking homemade to high-end professional. Even if it is for yourself, you don't want something to look homemade. Handmade, yes, not homemade. Especially where the seams intersect on the front or the back of a garment. Pressing will negate pesky puckers and wonky curves. I often use a spritzer to mist the water before pressing to help tame those curved seams, darts, or complex areas so they will lay flat. Pressing also has a way of marrying the thread to your fabric. So if you have been frustrated with puckering necklines, cuffs, bands, curved hems, and skip pressing altogether, I urge you to invest in a really good iron with the steam option and a fabric ham. It's almost like a pillow, but they used to be stuffed with sawdust. Now they're stuffed with other things, but they keep their shape and they're perfect for pressing things that are curved like your neckline or the bottom of a cuff or a hem without actually having to lay it flat because necklines aren't flat. I love the irons that have the narrower point so you can actually get into the smaller nooks of your garment. And I often gravitate to an iron that has a narrower tip because I make baby clothes. And so I like to be able to get into those little nooks. I often do not use an ironing board anymore. I actually keep a pressing pad that I bought off of Amazon right on my desk, and I will press directly in front of me and then get right back to the sewing machine. So I'm not having to get up a bazillion times. I can do it right in front of me. And then I just take the pressing pad and I move it over to the side and I keep sewing, and then I get my pressing pad back out. Now, you do have to keep your iron a little bit away from you so you don't burn yourself. I have done that. So just keep that in mind. It may be time consuming, so go ahead and just factor it into your time frame. Make time for pressing, okay? Make time. It will change your sewing game, I promise. I have not talked to one seamstress that said that they regret pressing. If anything, it elevates your entire garment. So needles, tension, pressing, it all matters. So does the fabric quality. It does not have to be the most expensive. Thankfully, we are given a variety of options now. With that being said, fabric does need to be made well, preferably from real fibers like cotton, linen, wool, or blends. And I used to not care. When I was first learning how to sew and sewing for my children, I didn't really pay attention all that much to fabric content. And I quickly was disappointed with some of the work that I would put into it. I would be pressing, I would be using the correct needles and tension, and then the fabric just would not hold up. But after years of sewing and learning which fabrics breathe and which ones don't allow our skin to breathe, I have learned this. When you put plastic fabric on your body or your children's body, you feel drained because that fabric, if you can even call it that, is not life-giving. It's dead. It's fake. It's made from plastic. So that's where you get your polyesters from. So be mindful, okay, of what you're purchasing. It may be a little bit more expensive, but I guarantee it will last so much longer, and you and your children's bodies will thank you for it. Lastly, be mindful of the season. Usually so for the current season that I am in, but I don't like the feeling of being rushed. So I have tried to be more intentional with preparing my fabrics and patterns before that next season. So ideally, you would want to sew for the upcoming season. For example, if you plan for winter, you would start buying fabric, and hopefully it would be on sale during the summer. You would start making this capsule of clothing together that is specific to winter during the summer. And this gives you ample time to pick your fabric, take your measurements, and maybe you can even plan and make little adjustments here and there to waistbands, especially for children, or for length. You can add an inch. Always easier to hem something up, but you can't add more length to it if you don't make plans for that. And then you're able to take your time to construct your garment, so you're not making mistakes and having to waste time with your seam ripper. You're also already making plans for these things, so you have them in stock. Your elastic, maybe you're making a waistband that has ties, so you go and you buy supplies for your ties. Everything is together. You're already making plans, and if something is not in stock, you actually have time to wait for it to come back into stock to get it. Like special buttons that you may want to use on the outside of a really beautiful coat that you're going to be making for the winter. Personally, when I'm admiring heirloom pieces, I often will notice that the seamstress took her time in every stitch. Every decision was intentional and planned. It is visible in the delicate pin tucks, the ruffles, and or the lace trims that we often find ourselves oohing and awing over. How did they do it? Why did they take so much time and effort in what they were making? Fabric was not cheap. It was made from 100% natural materials, being cotton, linen, or wool, and often the cost of the fabric was very expensive. So myself personally, I have a pretty large fabric stash. And some fabric is from when my oldest daughter, she's almost 12, when I was pregnant with her, and I still haven't used it. But fabric was not being stashed away for another time. So many years ago, 100 years ago, it was actually purchased with a project in mind, and then they put it to work quickly. To rush through an outfit would have been an embarrassment to the one doing the work. Women made sewing into a joyous event and often was done in groups. Might I add that I also love sewing in groups. If you haven't had a chance to go and enjoy a sewing group, oh, you are missing out. You need to make plans. So, new year, new you. You can do it. Make some friends. These women made time to slow down. They were able to make such beautiful wearable art that we now call heirloom. And to be fair, I don't think they ever thought, oh, I'm going to go in here and make an heirloom dress for myself today. But I do think that they were intentional with every detail. wearability, and planned their sewing knowing that their garment had to be passed down to the next child. And the option to rush through it was not even a factor. It had to be sewn well so it could last, which brings me to my next thought. The thing about rushed work, it doesn't always fail immediately, but eventually it does. A hem that wasn't properly secured starts to fray. The corner that wasn't reinforced weakens with every wash and wear. A garment that could have been worn for years becomes too delicate to trust. Or it just isn't worth worrying about the seams popping open when it's being worn just one more time. Longevity is built slowly and with intention. Strong seams come from correct tension, patience, pausing to check your work, pressing as you go, and using the correct needle for various types of fabric. A garment made with intention can be handed down, repaired, loved again. We want to teach our children that we mend the things that we care about. And here's a gentle invitation for you today. Slow your stitch. Choose quality fabric, be intentional, plan the extra time to press your seams. If you are using a pattern, read the instructions all the way through, once or maybe even twice, because it matters. Gather all your notions so you're not scrambling around to finish at midnight, and begin making clothes, bags, quilts, whatever it is that you are excited about that lasts. All of this is not because perfection matters, but because intention does. Whether you are sewing a dress, raising a child, or building a life, the things that are made slowly tend to hold together longer. If there's one thing I hope you take with you from this episode today, it's this. Slow work builds lasting things. The work is slow, the work is intentional, and the work is worth keeping. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, I would love for you to share it with another maker or a mother who could use permission to slow down. Thank you for joining me at the intersection of motherhood and making. I'm Whitney, and I will be back next Thursday with another episode. I will further our discussion on heirloom quality. Until next time, keep mothering, keep making, and keep choosing intention over rush.